Hello. Welcome to this evening's discussion with Roundhouse Theatre, in which our panelists will share their stories of how they found success and inspiration and joy in a time where all of those things feel more and more of a challenge. This panel is presented in conjunction with our production of Young Gene Lee's We're Gonna Die, directed and choreographed by Paige Hernandez, starring Regina Aquino with the Chance Club. We're Gonna Die is now streaming on demand via our website, and this show is made possible by generous support from our show sponsors, Doug and Lorraine Bibby and the National Endowment for the Arts. I'm associate artist Nesa Majgani, and I'll be your facilitator and host for this discussion. Before we bring on our guests, I want to acknowledge that our theater, administrative offices, education center, and production shop are all located on the unceded land of the Piscataway peoples. Roundhouse acknowledges the Piscataway as the original caretakers of this land. We pay our respects to the Piscataway community and their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. We also want to acknowledge that as the world experiences the COVID-19 pandemic, many of us, including everybody participating in this event today, are using the internet and other technologies that are not as readily available or accessible in present-day Indigenous communities. In our ongoing efforts to learn more and strengthen our relationships with members of our local community and to work towards dismantling the harmful effects of white supremacy and colonization, we pledge to do the work necessary to build relationships with sovereign tribal nations, to ensure that Roundhouse becomes a more inclusive space, and to never cease ongoing learning. I encourage you to check our website, roundhousetheater.org, for informational links to learn more about the Piscataway tribe, as well as how you can support organizations working to protect Indigenous rights nationally and globally. And now, let's introduce our panelists and get this conversation started. First, Regina Aquino is an artist, activist, and the star of our production of We're Gonna Die. Regina?
Hi.
Hello, welcome. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Thank you for having me, Nisan.
Next, we've got Apoorva Mandavilli, who's an award-winning reporter for the New York Times, focusing on science and global health. Hello.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure. I very much enjoyed and appreciated your reporting over the last year. It's been very helpful for my peace of mind.
Thank you.
Then Chef Tim Ma is a food and beverage entrepreneur, most recently with his tremendously successful Lucky Danger American Chinese restaurant, as well as co-founding Chefs Stopping AAPI 8.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure. Thank you, Tim. Welcome. And finally, Les Talusan is a DJ, photographer, curator, and organizer who co-founded the Sama Sama Art Show and Gathering. Please join us, Les.
What's up?
Hey there. Good to see you. I'm thrilled to have all of you with us this evening. Thank you so much. So to get things started, with our focus tonight on storytelling, as it has been throughout our spring season, I wanted to start by asking each of you to briefly introduce yourselves with your own stories of who you are and what you do beyond the brief snippet of context that I just gave. Regina, would you like to start off by introducing yourself to these fine folks?
Sure. And I do apologize. It seems like my internet, for whatever reason, is kind of wonky. So please bear with me if I cut out. I will come back and finish. My name is Regina Aquino. My pronouns are she, her. And I am an actor, director, writer, multi-hyphenate artist, creative. I'm all
I assume she froze for everybody. All right. Well, while we wait for her to come back, why don't Apoorva, would you be so kind as to introduce yourself for us, please?
Sure. I also apologize for my internet connection, but hopefully we'll have better luck. My name is Apoorva Mandavilli. I'm a reporter with the New York Times, and I have been a science journalist for about 20-some years, 22 years or so, to age myself. And I have, in most of that time, I've spent a lot of time editing, really, and have just come back to being a reporter and telling stories myself instead of just working with other people's copy and making that better, hopefully. And before the pandemic started, I was running a news site on autism science, so nothing at all to do with infectious diseases. But I used to write about infectious diseases a lot. And when the pandemic started, I felt, not to be hokey, but I felt sort of called to do that and not anything else. So I quit the job I had before and joined the Times to do just coronavirus reporting. So that, in a brief nutshell, is where I've come from.
It's beautiful. Thank you. Les, how about you? You could introduce yourself for us?
Sure. So, well, like what you read to everyone, I'm just going to give you a tiny blurb of what I usually do on my Twitch shows. I always say, hello, everyone. I am Les the DJ here in Piscataway Land, Washington, D.C., originally from Caloocan City, Manila, Philippines. And I've been DJing for over 25 years, taking photos the same, like that long too. Yeah, I guess I'm the curator and co-founder of Sama Sama Art Show and Gathering. It started as a gathering for APAM, Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month, but and to fundraise for underserved youth organizations in DC. But we've evolved into so much more than that. So that's that.
Fantastic. And Chef Tim, want to share your story with us briefly?
Yeah, hi, I'm Tim Ma. I'm a chef here in DC and Virginia. I guess I have a couple titles, but I'm culinary director of Lao Ban Dumplings, executive chef of American Sound in DC, and then co-founder, and then during the pandemic, and we'll speak about this a little bit more, but co-founder of Lucky Danger, which is a Chinese takeout, and then Chefs Stopping AAPI Hate, which is the nonprofit that I formed with Kevin Tien that mobilized around the country to raise awareness and funds for anti-Asian hate initiatives.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Oh, and now we've got Regina back. Let's want to try again?
Yeah, I'm so sorry that I missed everybody's intros. I'm Regina Aquino. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am an actor, creative, writer, director, single mother of 2 awesome daughters. I'm also an activist here in the theater community, and I am very delighted to have performed We're Gonna Die with the Chance Club.
Fantastic. So, the idea behind this evening was really, there's obviously a lot of challenges going on, both for us as a society as a whole, as individual artists, and obviously for the Asian American Pacific Islander community, specifically within America. This is a moment of elevated violence and both verbal and physical violence. And amongst all of that, with thinking about We're Gonna Die's focus on storytelling as a way of finding a path through hardship and suffering, we wanted to try to shift our focus away from sort of the trauma porn of let's look at all these terrible things and instead really think about what are the paths to success, the moments of triumph and inspiration and joy that still happen every day, even when things are challenging. And so I think starting with that, I really would love to hear about, from each of you, a time where you have found, what are those moments of success and progress and joy and pride? What's, one of those moments that you've found since the beginning of the pandemic? Tim, if you want to start, I'd love to hear anything you might have to offer on that. Oh, you are muted, sir.
Okay. May, or I guess the events leading up to May were like an interesting time, right? So like seeing everything that was happening on the news and looking at everywhere or all the videos and seeing just like fuzzy figures that look like my parents or my grandparents is really like kind of the motivation that was like activated, I think, in us to like start to take action and really just take action with what we know how to do. We're not activists. We don't really know too much about that. We kind of know how to raise funds and how to raise awareness and use our platform and have that responsibility to use that platform for things like this. And so that was really the moment, I think, during or like leading up to May that kind of like changed things for me, at least. And so mobilizing a bunch of chefs around the country to start just cooking food, and those being like not just Asian Americans, but also allies from every different culture, was something that was super inspiring to see. And then to have that happen around the country all on the same day, every week during the month of May was really fun to see, and to see everybody come together and react so powerfully to it was kind of like, okay, well, this started in something that was tragic and ended in something that was like very communal, which I thought was special for us.
Absolutely. That's wonderful. Thank you. Les, how about you? What's a moment of joy or pride for you in this last, however long it's been? Time has no meaning. 15 months, 16 months, where we're at now.
Well, there's a few. So one of them is very specific to Filipinos. Every Sunday, me and my friend Joel Kizon, who's in LA, we live stream and play Filipino music every Sunday. And a lot of elders join, a lot of younger folks. So it's called original Filipino music, even though it's not always original. It's just yeah. So it's nice to do that and to be able to share my archive of Filipino music, because I have so much, and just people, coming together and hanging out. And it's not just for Filipinos, right? And also sama. So me and my friend Seda, we usually have the gathering in May, and obviously we couldn't do it in May 2020, right? But we still wanted to create space. We still wanted to do something, so we had a couple of collaborations with Sustainable Culture Lab, and one of them is Altars Festival. Last year there were a lot of as a nation, I mean, I'm not American. I mean, I'm American now, but I didn't grow up here. I grew up in the Philippines, and we know how to mourn, and here as a culture, like American culture, I don't see that. So we did something called the Altars Festival, and that was really beautiful. So that I'm yeah, anything we do. And the last thing that I could think of is we co-curated the reopening events at the Reach at the Kennedy Center. I mean, when Sama Sama started, we did it at 10 Tigers. It's this bar. We only had a 3-hour pop-up. We were able to raise funds for AA Lead, and and then to be able to be, to do this, that was pretty amazing. Except we got rained out 2 out of 3 days. Wah, wah, wah. But Smithsonian APA Center gave us space and let us co-curate the arts market. So this past weekend.
That's really fantastic, and I love this observation of the sort of the lack of mourning, of grief literacy within U.S. culture. I think that's one of the things that I love about this play, is that it really helps with that. But that's something I hadn't really connected that to something about American culture that is deficient in that way. Apoorva, how about you? A moment of joy, of pride.
I've had many, many moments along the way. I think anytime I've had a reader reach out or tell me, like you did a little while ago, Nathan, that you found some sense of relief from my articles, just that was really what I was trying to do, was give people information so they felt empowered and felt like they knew what was going on, give people some sense of control over the chaos that was the last year. And so anytime I heard that made me feel like I was making a tiny bit of difference. And then there were a couple of big moments. One is November, I wrote an article about how immunity to the coronavirus is going to last a very long time. And it made me so happy to write that piece, because I had been writing bad news after bad news for so many months. And of course I wrote some nice things too, but that was one that really made me feel like there is a way out of this. We are going to get through this. And I really held on to that. And then the other big moment was a couple of weeks ago, the New York Times won a Pulitzer for public service for our coronavirus coverage. And of course, prizes are always great, but the reason that this one really resonates is because it was for public service. And I think that's ultimately what we were all trying to do. Everybody at the New York Times worked insane hours for the last year, and it sort of made it feel like it was worth it to have put ourselves out the way we did, to feel like people recognized it and got something out of it.
That's absolutely beautiful. Thank you. Regina, how about you?
I mean, aside from, being back in a theater and making We're Gonna Die with the Chance Club and You Find People, I preface this with the fact that like my family hasn't suffered any tragic loss. None of us got sick. None of us have been attacked. We have all been together. So my mother lives across the street, and so like we bubbled, and a lot of the ways that my friends and my peers were distanced from their family, I didn't experience that, and I'm very, very grateful for that. But it goes alongside the fact that as an actor, as a performer, before the pandemic, I was doing 5 shows a year, which means I'm away during the day in rehearsal for the first month, and then I'm doing shows 8 times a week for the next 2 months. I never got to spend time with my then 4-year-old daughter. I maybe put her to bed a month out of her entire 4th year. And when you think about it, like cumulatively, like as stressful as it was to help her through kindergarten from home, I got to spend all this time with both of my kids that I never would have had before. I got to spend time, instead of running around and doing theater outside of my home, I got to spend time figuring out what kind of art I actually want to make. And when a big source of joy for me was being asked to co-chair the Theater Washington Summit, because I've learned that my art and who I am as a human being and my activism need to be wed in order for me to be fulfilled. Like that is my purpose, and I don't think I knew that before the pandemic. So that's my joy. It's just finding all of these different ways in which I've expanded as an artist, even though I wasn't allowed to leave my home.
Yeah, no, all of that very much resonates with me in many, many ways. As a parent myself, yes, that's a big +1. I've been reminded just to call out that we will be saving time at the end of our session today for questions from the viewers at home. So if you've got any questions for any of our panelists, please feel free to drop those into the comments right down there, and we will, at the appropriate time, we'll pick through those and see what we've got to ask folks. So we've got a few more questions amongst ourselves before we get there. I think Tim, you already spoke to this, but for the rest of the group, is there a or Tim, obviously, if you have additional, is there a specific moment that really inspired you to take on this work that you currently do, or that motivates you to continue it? Yeah. Les, you seem anxious and waiting.
I'm just like, I have the answer for a question, because usually I'm like, wait, what's the question? I'm like that. I'm the worst at panels. So I was in New York for a DJ and photography gig the week that the last president was elected. And I was doing work for Smithsonian APA Center, and I remembered that I was staying with a friend, and she had a breakdown, and I was like, "Are you okay?" And she started, we were so upset, right, when the last president was elected, the one previous before the president right now. Am I doing good in my English, Regina? English check. Thank you. So being in that space at that Smithsonian event with like all these artists of color, and like seeing people that kind of look like you, it felt safe. And I felt that so I was thinking, oh man, because during Obama's when Obama was president, I would do like White House events and all these celebrations. Of course, I did not want to do any celebrations, because I even told the White House contacts, I'm like, I'm not DJing for your next president. Anyways, so that inspired me. Like I thought, like, maybe, because usually I would just be helping people out. Oh, you have a project? All right, I'll DJ for you. or I'll always just be in the background. But anyways, I found someone who was interested in doing a similar thing that I wanted, which is to let's fundraise, let's make space, let's do it. So yeah, that's how it all got started. And I didn't even use my name before. I just used Batang Kangkalo, which means Caloocan City Kid, because I didn't want to be like, this ain't about me, And eventually it was like, oh, you got to say it's you because it's weird. Like there needs to be, people need to know because people are like, who's running this thing? Like, is this funded? It's like, no, it's all volunteer and just like all like community oriented. So yeah, that was my like let's make space, and we're still continuing to do the work like with my current partner Seda.
Fantastic. Apoorva?
Sure. So for me, it was January 2020. I had been freelancing for the Times for a while, and they had a party. Their holiday party was at the end of January. Don't ask me why. The science desk. And so they had invited me to it, and I went there, and we were all talking about the virus. We were all talking about whether it was going to be a pandemic, because it wasn't clear at that point, and what did we know about this virus. And of course, we'd all been paying attention, and I had been paying a little bit of attention to the chatter coming out of China and in general, that we were all talking about it. But at that party, I started to talk with the person, my editor, at the time, who was still my editor, and I mentioned that I had written about SARS and MERS, and I mentioned that kids didn't seem to get sick during either of those, and maybe that was true for this too. And then, of course, we thought that was really interesting, and I wanted to look that up, and then I came back, and there was a paper very early on, some research coming out of China suggesting kids were not getting sick. So that was the very first article I wrote, and I started to feel like, oh, this is something I can contribute to. I know something about this because of having written about SARS, and maybe I should do more. And of course, very quickly, the Times ramped up its coronavirus coverage, and I started to do more and more. And at some point, I don't know, in April, I think it was almost like I was full-time, but I had a full-time job running a science magazine elsewhere, and I just couldn't do both. And they offered me a full-time job to go. And as I mentioned before, I felt like, even though it was going to be less money, because, the Times doesn't pay as well as you think it might, I just felt like I had to do this, that as a science journalist, I had been training for this moment my entire life, and I could not possibly sit this one out. So I felt like I had to throw myself in full bore and became a full-time staffer and started working like a demon.
It's interesting in so much of your responses both just now and earlier, Apoorva, there's such a clear sense of service motivating these choices. I'm curious, is that true for your career in general, prior to more recently, or is that a recent discovery?
I think I've kind of meandered towards it, because in the early part of my career, I was just, taking whatever job I could. Like Les, I grew up in India. So for a while it was, I'm not in the United States. And so for a while it was hard for me to get a job in mainstream journalism because like all the visa issues. So I think for the first decade or so, I just took whatever job I could get where people were willing to sponsor me for a visa and things like that. But at some point in 2007, I was recruited to start this autism website, this news about autism research. It was for scientists. It was very niche, but there was nothing like it at the time. And I loved the idea of building something from the ground up. And that site has gone on to become like the go-to source for scientists who are interested in working on autism. And I think that's that job. I built that up over a dozen years. And now it has a staff of 13 people. It's doing very well. It's won a lot of awards. I'm very proud of it. But I think over the period of time that I worked on building that up, I gained this sort of appreciation for serving a community, because that autism community, they're so hungry for information. They were desperate for good scientific information because there's so much junk out there, as I'm sure you know. So I think I just found it really gratifying to see communities of people coming together. Over the time that I was there, we learned more and more about the genetics of autism, and I saw family groups forming around particular mutations that their kids had and learning from each other. And this treatment worked for my kid, and what about you? And, you know, just the kind of difference information can make in people's lives. I think that really brought that home to me, because I was so close to it, and instead of just writing somewhere far away and not knowing what impact it has on people. And I think for this pandemic, like from the beginning, that part of it was very strong. Maybe partly because I was also spending a lot of time on social media, and it was easy to see what kind of impact it was having on people. But it felt like anything I could put out there, like the more I could work, the harder I could work and put out there, the more people would read it. It just was so much, you know, appetite for information. So I felt like I couldn't sit back at all. It's like, I guess there was that element of like, this is something I have to do for people.
That's wonderful. Chef, I'm curious, because you'd mentioned in sort of your initial intro, right, that having with Lucky Danger, the timing of that opening, I'm curious, is that, what was the inspiration for that project specifically?
You know, that was in the works actually, like starting from November 2019. My family had an exhibit put into the American History Museum in the Smithsonian here in DC. And so that kind of like sparked this whole, like, you know, family, legacy, food, culture, how those are all intertwined. So we actually started working on that project back then. The pandemic hit, and it really just allowed, and I think this was true for a lot of people, it allowed people to like slow down and look at what you were doing and what you wanted to do, and how you move forward. And so that's actually how Lucky Danger like kind of got catapulted forward. And then of course, takeout was a very popular method of eating during the pandemic, and still is to this day. And looking at like the landscape of what Chinese takeout is, and the perception of it in America is not always the best. And so you know, we looked at that vision of what Chinese takeout is, and was like, okay, how do we like bring this up so that it's comparable in America to other cuisines, and not looked upon as like down and dirty, or whatever you want to say about Chinese takeout. So that's really where it started to come from. And as we put it together, like we had this mission of just updating Chinese takeout, but we had this vision of having Lucky Danger be part of the cultural context of being Chinese in America, which is a lot of the story of some of my concepts, and this being no different. And so we're really happy in that, you know, we're allowed to use this vehicle to speak about things like this, or panels like this that we're talking about, or even when you start to think about the nonprofit work that we're doing now. And so we're very thankful for this time to be able to slow down and do something like that.
Yeah, true. Regina, how about you? You know, I think you mentioned this sort of recent discovery about your sort of aligning these various things you do, but also, you know, I'm just curious to hear, in addition to that, really what was your inspiration or motivation for the life you've chosen as an actor? Not the easiest path, obviously.
Is it not?
No, yeah, you didn't tell you that?
I think I've always been in the arts. And like my mother always supported that. My grandparents supported it. My mom was a single mom, and even though, you know, she was a single mom and she probably didn't want me to be a single mom, she wanted me to be successful and make money. She never told me that I had to be a nurse. She never told me I had to be a doctor or whatever. Like she didn't force any of that on me. And like I went to Duke Ellington High School, you know, so I knew from a very young age that I wanted to be a performing artist. And I am one of the few first generation Filipinos who had a family that was very much supportive of that, despite the fact that it is, you know, it's not a well-paid job, and it's stressful, and you're away from your family because you're doing shows on New Year's Day and Christmas Eve. But I never saw anyone who looked like me on stage growing up. I never saw anybody who looked like me on TV or in film. And when I do shows for children, I did a show called Where Words Once Were at the Kennedy Center about 3-4 years ago. And it's seared into my memory when young Asian children come up to me and ask me for my autograph and tell me that they've never seen someone who looked like them on stage, and that they are auditioning for, their ballet recital of the Nutcracker. The idea that my just working helps other people recognize that they also can just be, and that they don't have to, like, what society tells them, or the erasure of your culture, or the misrepresentation of your culture isn't true. That is very much something that tells me I'm doing something that I am meant to do. No amount of money in the world is worth that affirmation. And one of the things that I realized in my life is that, I don't wake up thinking I'm a Filipino woman. That's not how I identify when I wake up in the morning. I'm a human being, but I'm keenly aware that I'm a Filipino woman whenever I walk out the door, because I know how society views me. I'm keenly aware that my body and my experience, my last name, everything has been politicized as an actor, as a performer, in ways that I don't intend. My existence is made political by society, and by theaters, and by their intentions. And over time, I just embraced that and said, if you're going to politicize me, I'm going to have a hand in how you do that, or I'm going to tell you you can't. And over time, I said, I have played a Filipino maid in Georgetown. And even though it wasn't written that, I brought my full ethnicity into that role, even though it was never mentioned that I was Filipino. And I've committed to myself that I'm not going to play another caregiver without a very specific reason written into a play. Not because not because I'm above that. I have nothing but respect and love for the caregiver. There are caregivers in my family, and who take care of me and my children. But I want people to understand that Filipinos aren't just nurses or housekeepers or cooks. And like, my dream is to just play a mom in a dysfunctional family, a Christmas thing. Like, I want to deal with a crazy Filipino Christmas story and all of our fighting, and it not be rooted in trauma, but that doesn't exist yet. And so, like, that's what I want. And that's what I'm sort of shifting everything that I choose to do and the people that I collaborate with into fulfilling.
Now I know what play I need to go find. Cool. Great. What does success look like? But both in the short term, but also longer term. Mission accomplished. We did it. What does success look like for each of you? Apoorva, what about you?
Well, mine's probably the most straightforward. For me, success with the coronavirus especially looks like I'm not writing about it anymore. Like, we have stopped caring about it, and we're starting to get there. Actually, I'm writing about it less. I'm starting to write about HIV and polio and other things again, so that's good. But yeah, I think when we don't have to worry about this virus anymore, I feel like we've accomplished what we need to.
Something to look forward to. Les, how about you? What's success look like?
Success as what?
I think that's
So see, I failed this question.
No, that's great. Like, it is a deliberately broad and vague question. That's what I think. I'm curious here for you. Like, when you start a new project, when you start pulling together this year's lineup for Sama Sama, like, what's the goal? When you wake up in the morning, like, what do I need to accomplish? What do I need to hit? What's the mark?
Actually, so early June, when I saw things were starting to open. By the way, I was one of the members of the First Ladies DJ Collective when we were around in the early 2000s, and I'm also I've been with Girls Rock DC since inception. Yeah, we teach girls and non-binary kids to be their rock star selves. So, but anyways, oh, you too, your daughters, Tim, I see it's Regina. Well, when camp opens again. So I was seeing that lineups for DJs are still obviously cis men, like for events. There's this new club that opened in or bar that opened in 18th Street, and I'm like, this is obvious, like cis men. And then I heard back from feedback from a buddy, and he was like, oh, because the booking person just contacted the people he knew already, right? And then I keep seeing other flyers that it's just obvious cis men in all the lineups. So, inspired by Omanas TV, they call it a TV show, but really it's on Twitch. It's a week-long programming of Brazilian DJs, like all week, all women and non-binary DJs. And I happen to be part of it. I'm not in Brazil, obviously, but they're like, we're taking you in. I'm also part of another thing in Mexico. It's just so sweet. Like all these people creating space, and yet in my own city where I try to make space, I noticed that it's still there is still no gender equity. So at first I thought, let me just write a thing, let me just write this thing that says to booking folks, if you're booking an event for your bar or for a DJ for something, please consider, and if your lineup is looking mostly cisgender men, please consider booking a woman or a non-binary DJ. So that's how it started. And then, if you're a DJ and you see the lineup is all cis men, please make space. And if you don't know anyone, please hit me up and I'll give you referrals. So then after I wrote that, I thought, oh no, what if a lot of people hit me up? I'm like doing a lot of stuff. I can't possibly answer everyone. So because the Omanas TV programming, when they started, it was peak pandemic, and then there was like they had a big live stream concert, and it was like one woman and like 12 other men that are DJs, so that's why they were like, how come it's like this? And then the booking people were like, well, we don't know any other women DJs. So that's why they did that programming. So in my thinking, like, okay, there shouldn't be an excuse. And so I was like, okay. So before I posted that, which I haven't posted yet, I was taking a shower. And then I thought, sorry, it's going to be done soon. I was, sorry, I'm not good at telling stories. I'm trying my best. So I'm taking a shower and I was like, like when the times that I feel joy is when like my people are uplifted. By my people, I mean, other Asians, Black people, other people of color, other weirdos, really. Like, because I'm a weirdo. I'm just really weird. I met Regina at a rave, I think. In the 90s. All the weirdos knew each other back then in the Philippines. But so I was just thinking, you know what? Why don't I start a database/website where people can just sign up, and then yeah, so then there's no excuse for anyone. They can put their genres there and all that stuff. So anyways, yeah, that's success would be lineups where it's not irritatingly men.
That, yes.
As a DJ, I mean.
Yeah, no, I think that excuse of, we just talk to the people we already know. We don't know anybody. Right? Like that is across industries, across art forms. That is such a widespread excuse.
Exactly, and that's why even with the Sama Sama lineup for the reopening at the Reach at the Kennedy Center, it's actually mostly women and non-binary artists. Because we need more space. We need more space, and we need for cisgender men to actually make space or give us money to so that I can have this website coded and built, because coding is expensive.
I just wanted to say that I really echo that comment about that going across all art forms, because it's true even of journalism. It's like we have to really work hard to make sure that the people quoted aren't always just white men, because white men just recommend other white men, and it's like an endless cycle, and they're the ones who get quoted, and so they're the ones that whose names you know, and it's like this whole recall bias thing. So I've tried to be very mindful of that. I wrote a story today where there were 4 people quoted, 2 men of color, 1 woman of color, and 1 white woman. That's pretty good. But it takes you have to be very mindful. It doesn't happen if you just kind of, try to do it without thinking
right. And
about
similar to what you were saying before, Porter, right? Like that, to my mind, with that concern was like, it is so important for so many obvious reasons, and yet, success is like, I would love to not have to take that time to do that check and say, okay, like, how am I doing? That like success is getting to the place where like it's just, you can expect that that's the norm, that you don't have to make that point and take that time, that it just happens naturally. But it doesn't happen without, Tim, Chef, what does success look like for you?
I think it's two-sided here. One is probably along the lines of what Les was just talking about, but just in our industry, better representation at the top level. And when I say the top level, actually the ownership level, not. I think you see a lot of maybe executive chefs that are Asian, but that are actually not working for Asian Americans, and they're not the owners themselves. So, in general, like in DC, we actually have good Asian American food and beverage ownership representation, I think. When you get outside of DC and into other larger metropolitan areas, you actually don't see that. And so, I don't know what that change is or what the steps are towards that, other than, continue to represent and then, lift the next generation up, which I think is important. And so, that would be success when you start to see that at the ownership level within food and beverage, which is rare. I think the second part of it is in relation to like the justice work that we're doing, is that these conversations happen outside of May, and they continue to happen. They continue to persist throughout the year. So it's not just like, oh, okay, like all these things happen in May, and like thinking about how incredibly busy probably everybody on this panel was during May, and then everything just like shuts down and it moves on to the next thing. So, that is actually one of the major focuses of our nonprofit now, is to plan so that we're continuing to be represented and heard throughout the year, and that we're able to continue awareness and raise money throughout the year, and not just in the month of May, because I don't think it's just to be represented in one month of the year.
Yep, 100% understand that. Certainly in theater, we look around and we see seasons where there's one play by a Black writer that is programmed for February, right? That this is, again, these problems they show up across art forms, across platforms in so many different ways, but the same fundamental issue is really at the root of it, for sure. Regina, what does success look like?
Yeah, so let's talk about that fundamental issue. So success to me is dismantling white supremacy, just in general, dismantling white supremacy, combating anti-Blackness and transphobia and homophobia, toxic masculinity. I know that those are big words and like big concepts and like societal problems, but they are clearly what the inequities within each of our industries that we've talked about are rooted in. Like all the token Black play happens in February, the token Asian play happens in May or leading up to May, and it's kind of like what success to me looks like is knowing that the artists who come after me don't have to go through the trauma that I went through in order to learn how to speak up for themselves when they're in the room, whether it be sexualized trauma from misogynist directors, cis het or cis white directors who perpetuate misogyny in the rehearsal room, or just the blatant casual racism that happens with, you know, the white person that you've been working with for years in different shows, and yet somehow still manages to say racist things and won't listen to you when you say what they said is problematic. You know, like, I walk into any workspace, whether it was in the culinary world or whether it's in the theater, and I know that I'm going to be harmed at some point during that day. The question is by whom and how. I'd like success to me looks like knowing that, you know, artists of color, women of color, trans performers don't feel, disabled performers don't feel that way walking into a theater space. I'd like to know that somehow I helped move the needle forward by calling out all of the issues that white supremacist patriarchal theater is built upon, and that looks like breaking white Eurocentric form and allowing cultures to accurately represent themselves without white theater critics looking at it and saying, oh, representation's nice and all, but I didn't like the play. The play's not for you. I'm not living for you. I'm not writing my work for you. I'm trying to represent myself or my people. I have every right to write about my family and my upbringing as any mediocre cishet white man. And that's success to me, that I don't have to remind myself that I should walk through the world with that same kind of confidence and that same kind of self-regard, because I was raised to not do that. And I live in a society that makes me question myself and makes me minimize my voice. I'd like to get to a point where I know that my daughters won't have any problem walking into a room and asking for work or demanding the pay that they deserve, or calling out racism or transphobia that happens. Like, that's success to me. And it happens across all industries, but like in the theater, you know, like, can we start with stopping with tokenization? Can we start with diversifying theater criticism? Let's start with that. That would be success to me. If the Washington Post or any other publication decided to hire a theater critic that wasn't a cishet white man, that'd be great. Maybe a person of color, that'd be great. Maybe a trans writer, that'd be great.
I'm on board with all of that. Works for me.
Thanks for saying Washington Post and not the Times.
We're in DC. I mean, you know, and like and that's not to say that like the Washington Post hasn't. There have been steps made in the right direction. There have been articles written, but it's still like rooted in what good quote unquote theater is, and what are those standards? They're classist, they're European, they're white Eurocentric European standards. Like, what are the classics? What are we eating? And like, and who gets to determine that? And why is a play written by a young Black gay writer being viewed through the same lens and the same expectations as Shakespeare? Like, why are we doing that? And how come nobody's asking those questions publicly? Because if we continue to write that breaking form or these experiences are not speaking to these critics who don't come from that environment, then we are limiting the voices that are the perspectives that are allowed to be presented on stage, and people won't go and buy tickets to that show, and it limits the art form, and it perpetuates white supremacy. And I'm on a soapbox now. I'm going to stop. Sorry.
I think it is all warranted, and again, I do not disagree with a word of it. However, I also want to. So thank you, but I also want to. We got. I see a question in the comments, and if there's more folks, please drop them in. But we have this question from Hongwei Chen. Thank you all for sharing your journeys. What advice would each of you give to a young person, especially a young AAPI person, interested in entering your career field?
Which career field? Hongwei Chen.
I think any and all are on the table. Or, what advice would you give to the next Les Taliesin in all of your multi-hyphenate glory?
Just do it. Don't worry about anyone else. Just do it. Just be weird. Be different. It's okay.
I can say for the writing field that if you're a young Asian or any person of color entering the field, that you might want to seek out some mentors, because it's still very at the top are still just white men. So if you need to get ahead and you need to be noticed, you need sponsors. You need people to push you forward and say this person's really good, and that doesn't happen unless you have people. So I would say seek out mentors of color and make sure they know who you are so they can put your name forward.
Yeah, I second that, especially in my industry, I think. But I think in all industries, find a mentor that you admire or that you want to stand on the shoulders of, not be like you want to take that and take it to the next level. And so, but I think having that person to kind of, teach you the lessons quickly of what the mistakes that they've made so that you learn from that, that way you have a much stronger platform to jump off from.
Regina, anything you would?
Yeah, and like I would absolutely piggyback off of that. I didn't have anyone. Like I only 4 years ago was when I met the one Filipina who could play my mother, and I've been acting since 2003, right? So like I went 16 years where all of my white peers could name 10, 20 different actors in town that could play their parents. I didn't have anybody to help me, or to ask questions, or to tell me you need to look out for this because this is what's coming for you, and don't let it destroy you. And for me, it's making sure that kind of information gets to young artists of color. So, whenever people, like I have a lot of friends who are professors, at Maryland or at Bowie State or at Howard. And whenever I'm asked to speak to college students, I want to sit down and tell them that they are absolutely the future, and that they don't need to try to be the best Asian Hedda Gabler, because you can toss that aside and write your own experience. Like you don't have to be the best minority in a white world. And we don't have to compete with each other, and that we should be speaking each other's names in spaces, because every time another Asian actress gets a job, I am also winning. And every time one of us wins, we all win. So like just getting rid of that crab mentality of like, I have to be the best, because that's still part of that white supremacist model minority ladder. Like, let's get rid of the ladder. Let's promote each other. Let's make sure that we are getting the jobs and we are taking the space. And just speaking the truth. Like don't be afraid to be who you are. That's really like, yeah, I wish I'd heard that.
As Les said, be a weirdo. Absolutely.
I can't help it. I'm not anything else. And there's no one to mentor me with anything that I do. So.
This was wonderful. I want to take a moment for each of you. Is there any work you're currently doing that you would like to plug? Any shameless self-promotion or links? Where should people go to see more of you and see more of your work? Any and all of you, please. I think we can hop some links up on the screen to direct folks. Les, why don't we start with you? Where should people go? What should they see?
Okay, so I'm most active on Instagram. It's just my first and last name, Les Talusan. And every week I DJ online. Tonight I'm DJing with DJ Neil Armstrong. Remember him? He was Jay-Z's tour DJ, Obama's first inauguration DJ. He's also Filipino American. And we are doing a new wave post-punk night on Twitch. So it's twitch.tv. That's what I was trying to type, but I was like, how do you type while you're talking? Twitch.tv/Les Talusan. Yes. Oh, you do, Tim? I'm gonna tell him. I'm gonna tell. It's so surreal. The people that I have met on Twitch, I'm just like, really? Do you want to DJ with me? But anyways, so yeah, that, and then yeah, I'm on Twitch. Our New Wave Heartthrobs night is the last Monday of the month, and then most Fridays I DJ, but every Sunday is OPM Sundays. And just please follow me and follow samasamaart.com.
Beautiful. Chef Tim.
Yeah, so follow for the nonprofit Chef Stopping AAPI Hate. And then Lucky Danger is luckydanger.co. And then I'm just Chef Tima on Instagram. And also please follow Les and Neil Armstrong tonight, because I, as a younger person, loved Neil Armstrong. He used to do Dinner and a Mixtape, if you remember that. So culinary and music colliding, which was the best thing. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. Apoorva, people want to see your work. What should they do?
My author page on the Times website, I think it's just NewYorkTimes.com/Apoorva-Mandavilli, or by something like that. And if you just search for my name, it should come up. And then I'm on Twitter, where I tweet pretty much everything I write and other stuff. That's at Apoorva_NYC.
And Regina, anything that you'd like to plug for our audience right now?
Yeah, no, I'm still just like sitting on like thinking about Les, and like I know that Les, didn't you DJ on Sunday nights for a restaurant in DC? Like just this idea of like culinary and like dance music or Filipino music and
ABC. So I was hanging out at Shopkeepers with Seda talking about sama-sama stuff. And then I saw Eric Brunner Yang there, and he was like, this is last year. Oh, I just opened ABC Pony. I have 2 Filipino chefs there. And I was like, oh, dude, I could DJ for you. Maybe I can play Filipino music. And he was like, or he said, you should DJ, something like that. Anyways, 2 days later, DC closed. So yeah, lockdown, and then eventually they started hiring me to DJ on their Instagram. But before I forget, I've been talking to Tom Kunanan. He wants me to DJ at the Block for maybe one of those days, so that we can have like a gathering or something, like just a hang out with like food and stuff, and of course like Asian and AAPI music.
Yes. That's amazing.
And New Wave, because it's part of our New Wave is part of our thing.
And sappy love ballads. We love
exactly
those.
All the things.
Yes, Filipinos need to feel. Because there's just so much suffering that like we also need to feel other things. I'm doing this workshop at San Diego Rep right now with a Filipino playwright, and we were talking about how there is so much that karaoke is so big in the Philippines because people need to just feel something other than the drudgery of everyday life. I'm like, wow, that does make sense. Like we are resilient people, and we have feelings and we will express them. God damn it. But for me, my gosh, you can see me in We're Gonna Die, which I am so grateful for. It was like the biggest gift in the whole world to do this show with you. Yes, We're Gonna Die. I get to sing and be a rock star and live my wildest, 16-year-old dream and docks and leather pants. Like it's wild. I had such a good time. And it was art and it was cathartic and so amazing. I have a website, reginaakino.com. You can find me there. Jasmine, you're amazing. I'm also on Instagram, regina.r.aquino. You can follow me there. I'm about to direct my first production called We the Invisibles, written by an Asian American playwright named Susan Soonhee Stanton, and that will start rehearsing, thank you, in August. Again, I mentioned the Theater Washington Summit. We will be doing a 2-day event with a lot of really great content around community building, anti-oppression, like just naming and trying to create spaces for people to gather online. And just so many other things, but mainly I cannot wait to go on vacation with my family. So you'll see all that on my Instagram too.
Fantastic.
I'm sorry, I forgot. I have a radio show at Eaton Radio. That's where I used to always see Tim I'm like, oh, it's that guy in the radio station.
Fantastic. This was wonderful. Thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you for watching at home, those of you watching on YouTube. And we look forward to seeing everybody again soon. Have a lovely evening, everyone. Thank you so much.